This is Psychology, AQA Psychology, so this is for the A-level, and it's particularly on research methods and skewed distributions on request from Grace. So hopefully this will help you. Okay, so we first of all need to know and refresh our memories on normal distributions. So normal distribution is basically saying that you're getting a good cross-section of society's scores. So your scores have come from a really good spread of people. And the characteristics of a normal distribution, just so as a refresher, because you need to know this, are that they are bell-shaped. Okay, they're symmetrical around this midpoint, and the mean, mode, and median all lie at this midpoint. The other thing that's really useful with normal distributions is knowing about if we know that we've got data from a normal distribution, knowing about the standard deviation of the scores tells us, and we can work out the proportions or the percentages of the group's scores that lie around this midpoint. Okay, so that's just a refresher. So knowing that, now let's look at skewed distributions. Okay, so skewed distributions. So let's define them first. You would need to know that. This is basically that there's distortion or asymmetry, so they're not symmetrical, asymmetry in a normal distribution of a set of data. Okay, so when data has not come from a normal distribution, we get very little data that's represented at one side or another. In other words, we get what we call high or low scores, which results in a skewed graph, and I'll explain that now. So what do you need to know? First of all, you need to remember which is which. Okay, so negative and positive, you would need to be able to identify that before you do anything else. So the way to remember that maybe is to think about the shape of your toes as you look down. Okay, so if you're looking down or you're in bed with your feet sticking out, left and right feet when looking at them from above. So we get left skew and right skew. And the negative skew is on the left, positive skew on the right. So that's the first thing you just need to remember. The other thing to recall, so once we've had a look at that, let's just look at this. It's probably a better image to help you. So the other thing to remember is that if we take these as our scores, we've got our scores along the x-axis and our frequency along the y. So we try to remember that this is, let's say, as an example, scores, people's scores, or the groups of scores from 0 to 100. So far we've got left foot, negative skew, right foot, positive skew. We've got our scores along the bottom, okay, and the frequency, the number of people along the y-axis. Okay, so we also have something called positive and negative zones, which also follow the same pattern. So in other words, the left-hand side of each graph is the negative zone and the right-hand side is the positive zone. Left-hand side will be negative, right-hand side positive. So try to remember that. Okay, so you might need to sketch each, and when labeling or drawing them, the mode, remember this, the mode is always the highest point. It's the most popular, so it's the highest. The median is always our mid score, so that's always going to be in the middle. And it's only the mean score that will differ on either side when you're actually scoring and trying to draw in the mean, median, and mode. So the mean is the one that alters. And to be honest, the mean is going to be the middle point anyway. So you can see here, this is 0 and this is 100. There's our mean, pretty much midpoint. 0 to 100, the mean is the middle point. Okay, so it's going to be in the middle. So if an exam question states that in a set of data, something like this, let's say they give you data like this. They say the mean is 19, the median 22, and the mode is 25. And they might ask you to sketch that skewed distribution. So you would have to work out which, is it left or right? Is it negative or positive? So just think about it like this. The mean is, in this case, lower than the median and mode. So the mean has to be based here. Okay. If we have a set of scores like this, where the mean is higher, that's going to be a positive skew because the mean is further along. The mean is in the middle, but it's also further along the group of scores. So here, mean 29, median in the middle, and the mode is 18. So the mode comes first, is the lowest point from 0 to 100. Here it's 18, then we go up to 20, and then we go to 29, the mean. Okay. So just to recap so far, we've got our left foot is our negative skew, right foot is our positive skew. We know we've got our frequency is along the y-axis, scores along the x-axis along the bottom here, 0 to 100. We know where our mode is always going to be at the highest point. The median is always going to be the middle. The mean is the one that differs. The mean is going to be in the middle of the scores, 0 to 100, let's say, and the mean is the one that will shift. If it's a smaller mean than the others, then we're going to have a negative skew. If it's a larger score than the others, then we're going to have a positive skew, because that mean score is further along this line. And finally, just to recap, the zones. So left, this bit here is the negative zone, the right of the graph is the positive zone in both cases. Left is the negative, right is the positive. So now we want to look at where the scores lie. In this graph, most of the scores, if we're thinking 0 to 100, most of the scores are over here on the positive side, okay, in the positive zone. And on this one, most of the scores, the bulk of the scores, here's the frequency, are in the negative zone. Okay, so we should always be looking at where do most of the scores lie. So a lack of data, very little data in the negative zone means the scores are skewed over here in the positive zone. Okay, and vice versa here, most of the scores are in the negative zone. So examiners might ask you, or might give you a skew and ask you why we might get a positive or a negative skew. Okay, so just think back to this data. If we have a negative skew, we know that most of the scores are high. Most of the scores are here between 50 and 100 in that group of scores. And vice versa, if we get a positive skew, most of the scores are here. They are low, right? They're up to 50, let's say, in this example. So why might most scores be high, for example, on a group scores? Have a think about that. Why would you get a group of scores where most of the scores are really high? Well, you probably worked it out. You've either got a group of people, a biased group of people, who are very good at that particular test, or you've got a very easy test, and that's why the scores are very, very high for that particular group. And vice versa for a positive skew. If the scores are all in the low end, then that means that the scores are that the test is really hard, or the people haven't prepared, or they're not very good at that particular test. So the final thing that they might ask you then is, how would a researcher alter this to get a more normal distribution? So if you already know that a negative skew means that scores are very high, you would just make the test a bit harder, or you would do your best to try to get a normal distribution. In other words, a bigger cross-section of people. If you know that your scores are very low, like in the positive skew here, then it means we would just make the test a bit easier, or we would attempt again to get a good cross-section of people. So what might you be asked? Okay, it's just a recap. They might ask you to draw or to sketch the skews. They might give you data like this and ask you which skew it is, right, positive or negative. They might ask you why or what the researcher could do to alter the balance to get a more normal distribution as opposed to a skewed distribution. have a go. And what I suggest you do is have a go now at sketching them and just labeling them. Okay, and then have another little go at these questions. So I hope that has been helpful for you. If it has, please like it, and also please subscribe. I'm going to be making more of these, particularly the research ones that have been requested. And so have a go at subscribing, and you'll get a notification then of the new videos that come up.